Hello, and welcome to Evidence to Employment, Transition Research in Action, where research meets real life, where the future of work for youth with disabilities is being reimagined. I'm your host, Carolyn Cage. I'm the Director of Training for the VCU-RRTC on Employment Among Transition-Age Youth with Disabilities, or as we like to call it, RRTC Transition. In this series, I'm talking with researchers, educators, and youth to unpack the stories, strategies, and data behind this work. And I'm thrilled to be talking with a guest whose work has helped impact the very foundation of disability employment and transition services. I'm a veteran special educator, and I've had the pleasure of knowing Dr. Paul Wehman for many years, and it's been inspiring to witness the impact of his work firsthand. He's a pioneer, a visionary, and a driving force behind my career, supported employment, and inclusive transition practices, and I'm sure the careers of many in my field. Over the decades, he has championed meaningful opportunities for youth and adults with disabilities, influencing classrooms, communities, and policies across the country. Dr. Wehman, thank you for joining us. It is an honor to have you here and to be able to talk with you today.
Thank you, Carolyn. I really appreciate all those kind words. First of all, I don't think I deserve anywhere near all those kind accolades, but I'll take them. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I can remember when I first came to VCU and met you for the first time, and I told you I was a fan.
Well, the truth is, anybody who has worked here with me knows that, and this is not false modesty, and you can see because you work with the people here. And this is my second family. It's my second home. It really is. And I don't know that I'll ever retire, really, because there's so many people who help raise me up, basically. And for that matter, a lot of people here raise other people up to be the best they can. And so for me to be a so-called visionary throughout my career or whatever, you're really only as good as the people around you. I really do believe that. But yeah, on a family level at home, but especially at work, okay? And so I think you've been here long enough, Carolyn, to know that we have a pretty special group of people here, okay? And people aren't worried so much about their degrees, or they're just worried about getting their work done and helping people with disabilities and their families. And, we've always kind of kept our eye on the ball over the last 45 years on this. And it just gives me a lot of pride when I walk in the door every day. I know this sounds like a big infomercial for the RRTC, and I don't want to take up any more of your time with that, but it is a very important point because every time somebody does something good, like get somebody a job, because we have a lot of job coaches here, or, create a new program like the State Transition Leader Academy. I mean, these are all really innovative things that we're doing that are making a difference all over the country. I know that because I hear from people all the time. And it's, just hearing about the Pre-S program the other day at a competing center, ICI, Massachusetts, this made me feel so proud that I'm working with people like the folks at the Transition Innovations, which is part of, RRTC. So,
Well, I appreciate that. And since you mentioned 45 years and all of that, I want to know more about that. But let's start with the Paul Wehman story. Tell us a little bit about your background and your personal history, if you don't mind.
I don't mind. It's really pretty basic and simple. I mean, I grew up in Chicago near Wrigley Field. I was a Cubs fan. Then I moved to a suburb 2 blocks away from Hillary Rodham Clinton and got to know her and kept up with her for a while. And then I went to high school, and I played basketball in high school and college. I went to Western Illinois, Illinois State, and then I heard this guy, Lou Brown, who kind of was a transformative figure in my life. He was kind of like they called him the father of the severely handicapped at the University of Wisconsin. So I stopped working at the state institution, that was a very foundational experience for me, working with, some of the hardest people on the planet, really. Fortunately, they shut that institution. Um, and then I came to VCU kind of just to get away from the Midwest, and thought I'd stay for 3 years. And I stayed about 51 years, and as far as a personal history, I don't really have any. I'd like to say I had a lot of hobbies, but I really don't. I played lots and lots of basketball and sports, and when I was young, and then I played them when I was also, with my kids and also in adult leagues. But I think probably one of the reasons I haven't retired is because my passion has been my work and the people I work with, and also my wife doesn't want me home. She wants me out working. She thinks it's a good idea. So I know that you're probably going to ask me, how did I get us into supported employment and all that? And I can do that easy enough. But once again, it was not a plan. I mean, it was sort of like, they say God has a purpose or a reason for everybody. And I apologize for any religious or spiritual metaphors, but I do feel pretty strongly in that direction. And I must say that, just watching the joy when you're able to help people, particularly with the more severe disabilities and their families, it's like a natural reinforcer. It makes you want to do more of it and be around people and spread the word, really, And so how did I get into that? My master's master's degree was in psychology. My undergraduate degree was in business, and I got a rehab psychology degree in Wisconsin. So, I ended up training teachers for a few years at VCU, but I knew that wasn't going to do it. And so I kind of came back to, this whole concept that we had been working on in Wisconsin, and that is trying to help people with disabilities get jobs. And I thought, so I went to Voc Rehab. They gave me some money, and we got started with this whole support employment thing. One thing led to another. We're off to the races. And like I say, I had great people working with me.
That's quite a journey, Paul. It really is. So you've witnessed and shaped decades of change in how we support youth with disabilities. Can you walk us through some of those key milestones or turning points in the history of transition services, and what did those moments feel like from your perspective?
Carolyn, you get to a certain age when people ask you about history, and better to tell history while I'm still above ground rather than trying to navigate it from the grave, and there are some points that stick out. Fortunately, I finished my PhD right around the time that the Education for All Handicapped Children Act was passed in 1976. Gerald Ford, I might add. And as I could go through the litany of individuals that, from a Eunice Shriver, who came down here to see the first support employment, and she brought Madeline Will, who was at that time the Assistant Secretary for Special Ed. And, she was married at that time to George Will, a very conservative writer for the Washington Post. And they had a son together named Jonathan, who was one of the early beneficiaries of supported employment, and she wanted to see it firsthand. So a starting turning point, I guess I would say, would be the beginning of supported employment, which at that time we called the trainer advocate model, but it was switched over in 83, 84 to the term supported employment. And coincidentally, at that time, we wrote a grant that nobody thought we could get, and we did by a hair, and it was a rehabilitation research and training center on employment. And at that time, I really didn't want to stay training teachers. I didn't mind working with teachers, but I just didn't want to be going around driving to all the school classrooms and everything. I wanted to do more research. And so, this building, well, we're in two buildings now, just off campus, was born, and we used the rent money from the grants to support it. And a lot of people give me credit for starting support employment. I know that we were among the first that was doing the individualized plan, not the enclaves or the mobile work crews. Well, the one thing I didn't tell you that I don't remember if this is a question or not, but why would I want to get into this? I was never a guy that was working for Kiwanis with a can asking for money. I didn't have any spiritual revelation that I needed to help the so-called handicapped. But I did have a powerful competitive urge. It came from sports, and I've urged my children, if they feel it, to let it out, okay? Because that competitive urge is something that can drive you and motivate you to show other people that they're wrong. And that's exactly what has been, I would say, one of the personality attributes that I have that has worked. There's a lot of personality attributes I have that are not very good. I mean, people say I can be intimidating. People say that, I think I know everything. Yeah, they'd probably be right about that. All right. But the real issue is that I don't, when I hear no, I think yes. Okay. When I hear back of the bus, I say raise them up. Okay. And I mean, there's this song at church called The Bread of Life. And I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard it, but it's one of the greatest songs because it's constantly talking about, lifting up people. Okay. And I'm not talking just about people with disabilities. I'm talking about people who are hurting, people who've been injured, people who bad things have happened. And that's one of the things that's really great about this center, Caroline, is that that now, okay? I spent over 35 years on the medical campus because there was a doctor down there that really thought the idea of a job coach could help people with physical disabilities like brain injury and spinal cord injury. And he was right. So I moved down there. Well, I still kept the center job here on the Monroe campus. And what I found was a lot of the doctors, they also had children with disabilities. And they were fascinated about the fact that we could help people, get real jobs, real work for real pay, and not just have to sit in a workshop or a day program, okay? And when I hear somebody come in and tell me that somebody can't get a job because of this or that, that's 1970s and 1960s thinking, in my view. If they said it then, it might have been true because nobody had figured it out how to do it. But in 1985 to 1995, we were basically showing how it could be done, and people were copying it. We were presenting it, we were writing about it, and we actually started a program here in 1986, a job coach program that was vended by the Voc Rehab program. And all of that was, basically turned into a model for how state agencies could give money to federal agencies, they could give money to local programs that would help individuals with disabilities, significant disabilities, get real jobs. Now, in 1990, we got to the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. That was July 26th. I was there. So was Justin Dart, who was one of the great heroes of all time for disability, along with Judy Heumann, the first George Bush, who's a wonderful, wonderful man for people with disabilities. So was his son, the second George Bush. Americans with Disabilities was a civil rights law, and there was no money associated with it at all, okay? But then another really important point that happened was in 1997, I got a call from a guy who was working on the Medicaid waiver, and he asked me if I thought that that would work for people in supported employment. And I almost jumped out of my seat because I knew if we could get money through Medicaid waiver and the Center for Medicaid Services, CMS, that we wouldn't have just time-limited rehab dollars. Now, I passed an important point back in 1986. Support employment had gained enough traction in terms of what VCU and other programs in the country were doing that were beginning to become believers. And there was an awful lot of negativism, and you can't do it, which of course makes somebody like me and some of the team members that I had want to do it even more. So we would just keep trying to get harder people to place. But 1986 was important because at that time the Voc Rehab Act had to decide, it had to be decided whether it was going to go into the Rehab Act, and I wanted it to be in a federal program, or the Developmental Disabilities Act. Well, I voted for Voc Rehab, even though at that time Voc Rehab was very suspicious of me, as were all the shelter workshop people, of course, who hated me because they thought I wanted to close the workshops, which I did, okay? So, you know, I took a little bit of grief for that. But then the rehab people didn't hate me so much anymore because, you know, I saw the real powerful value. There are rehab programs everywhere. Every state's got them. They're in every district of the area. And I really, really liked not only our own, I've always loved the people that were in VR in Virginia. I mean, I can go through the names of the people back in Jim Cook and Paul Bassett's day who gave me a grant to get started with this whole thing, to Al Dickerson in 1986. He lived actually near where I lived, and he was not a believer, and then he ended up being a believer. And then, you know, the great Kathy Hayfield and Dee Dee Batten, who are leading the program right now. I mean, so we're blessed in this state, and a lot of states have got some really pretty modern VR people, okay? So the biggest problem with the VR program was time limited. Once they gave the money out, that was it. It was also an eligibility program, which means that from a financial standpoint and also a disability level, you had to be a certain stage, or if you weren't, they wouldn't, you know, let you in the program. So I don't regret the Voc Rehab Act at all. I wish that it was longer, but it was in every state and in every district and region, and you didn't have that in the DD Act, okay? And over time, the problem was without the longer term funding for most of these people, they would fall out no matter how good the job coach was. So when the Medicaid waiver came in 1997, if a state would write for the waiver, they could match money with the federal government. And that's when you look at the success in the different states in the country, those states that have good Medicaid waivers for supported employment or customized employment, but it's mostly supported employment, they've done much better, because what happens is you have the handoff from Voc Rehab to the Medicaid waiver. And so you go to a place like Pennsylvania or Washington State, and they're really, really doing well because they could just hand off those folks and they'll get a one-on-one service for life, okay, as long as, you know, the case manager will affirm the fact that they have enough disability, they should receive those services. So that was 97. Then in 2004, you had that was the last transition got into that law for the first time in 2000. I think it was 2004. Might have been 1997, but
I think you're right. 2004. Yeah.
Yeah, and then after that, you didn't have anything because we haven't had any special ed law reauthorized. The rehab law was reauthorized in terms of Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act in 2014. Not a bad law, but there's some mistakes in that. Nevertheless, both the laws need to be updated, And it would be nice if Congress would do that.
Wow, what an insightful journey through our field's history with Dr. Paul Wehman. He truly is a pioneer who didn't just witness change, he's been leading the charge. Thanks again to Dr. Wehman for sharing his story and wisdom with us. Join us next time on Evidence to Employment, Transition Research in Action.